The year is 2050. One of the most visible consequences of a warming world is the increase in intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. There has been irreversible changes in the surface temperature and precipitation. Since 2030, there's been an additional 250,000 deaths per year due to malaria and heat stress alone. This Petcha Kucha will look more specifically into how it has affected the music industry and how the industry responded to these challenges in different ways. Look back and imagine we're in the early stages of the 21st century. The year is 2017. Climate change continues to be the main topic of conversation. The Paris Agreement has just been signed by the 194 countries to set targets in a bid to reduce climate change, with its ultimate goal to hold the increase in global average temperature well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Moving into the year 2019, the world was stunned by global COVID-19 outbreaks, causing over 184,000 deaths worldwide. Aside from the devastation, it proved remedy for the climate crisis with a 17% decrease in daily CO2 emissions and proved that if forced, the government could limit people's freedom to travel and use resources which, if implemented long term, could be a great way to tackle climate change. However, due to the economic loss from the pandemic, profit became the main driving factor for governments and businesses, and saving the environment was a secondary thought. Over the next few years, CO2 levels got worse than ever before. Although there was mass devastation due to COVID, it was the first time people were forced to shift in relationships between music artists and their followers. Different ways of consuming entertainment were tried, with virtual events proving successful. For example, the live Ariana Grande concert on the video game Fortnite, which at the time was described as a musical journey like no other, enjoyed by millions of fans worldwide. Over the next few years following the pandemic, virtual events, although proven to be successful, were still not as popular as in-person events, which continued to be the norm throughout the late 20s and early 30s. Even though the government were aware of the damage it was causing the environment through waste and travel, which contributed to an increase of greenhouse gases by 50%, they continued to allow in-person events due to the significant economical benefit. This reflected the stubbornness of authorities at the time, as they were more concerned about making profit than staying within the guidelines of the Paris Agreement that was signed 10 years prior. Due to not hitting the targets of the agreement, the crisis continued and irreversible temperature changes took place, leading to a rise in seawater levels and increased rainfall amounts. This led to an increase in intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. 2034, the Great Coastal Surge strikes the United Kingdom, causing severe devastation along its coastline. This disaster is a result of a combination of rising sea levels and intense storm system, has a profound impact on the UK economy, affecting industries such as tourism, fishing and agriculture. The cost of rebuilding infrastructure and supporting affected communities further strains the resources. This devastation finally opened the British general public's eyes about the impact of climate change, as it's estimated 35% of people in the UK were directly affected by the disaster in some way. Over the next 12 months, the UK economy was forced into recession, leading to 6% of people losing their jobs and homelessness reaching an all-time high, with over 1 million people forced onto the streets. The music industry was massively affected during this time, as venues across the country closed down due to limited transport and a massive fall in attendance from the lack of disposable income. However, the government still encouraged festivals to go ahead due to the economic benefit. This caused an uproar amongst the whole nation, who blamed the government for their lack of responsibility for climate change. Just Stop Oil created a post on social media encouraging a nationwide protest against the government's plan to allow festivals to go ahead. Just Stop Oil is an organisation who made a name for themselves by protesting with orange paint in a bid to make noise about climate change. Initially, in the 20s, the majority of the British public opposed their actions, as they were viewed as an annoyance, with 68% of the public disapproving of the group. In contrast to this, their post on social media was liked over 15 million times within a week of its post and went viral, not only across the UK but all over the world. Unknowingly at the time, Just Stop Oil would change the live music industry forever. Within a month, the post became the most liked Instagram photo of all time, with over 200 million likes, with break-off groups in America and Europe planning to protest their own governing bodies. This led to a crisis meeting being called between the United Nations discussing the risks of the planned protests, which they eventually decided to cancel all large-scale music events as any other large-scale unnecessary events, which included travel such as conferences, which were encouraged to move online until further evaluation. This rocked the music industry, with artists questioning how to engage with their audience. Many artists took inspiration from the COVID-19 pandemic, which proved that you could connect with fans online through virtual events and producing live broadcast events. It was received well by the public, as they could watch their favourite artists perform from the comfort of their own home. Over this 2-year period, staggering statistics were produced which read that by transitioning to online events, it reduced related carbon emissions by 99%. There was a reduction in over 2 billion tonnes of waste, with carbon levels in the atmosphere decreasing by over 20%. Even though irreversible damage was already done to the environment, in this 2-year period alone, it showed that it can be slowed down. Due to its environmental success, the UN voted in favour of keeping the ban in place for a further 10 years. Although logical, many people felt frustrated as they missed out on live events and didn't feel virtual events replicated the emotion of being there. The only thing that almost replicated being at a live event was virtual reality. Virtual reality had been around since the early 20s, however, it hadn't reached the mass audiences due to it being expensive, and over the 20 years prior to this, it had been a very tough time for people financially. Knowing this, over the next year, the UK government worked closely with big tech companies such as Apple and Samsung for investment in a bid to produce more VR headsets and make them cheaper and more accessible to the general public in order for them to engage more with virtual events. By 2042, there was a mass rollout of VR headsets which were sold at an affordable price. Within 5 years, 55% of the UK had access to VR headsets, and it didn't take long for the rest of the world to follow suit. And at the end of 2048, 20% of the world had access to a VR headset. Record-breaking VR concerts were performed, including Live Aid 2045, which at its peak was viewed by 200 million people live. The music industry was thriving and has continued to until now, and is now worth more than ever before. Now, here we are in the present day. The average global temperature has not increased since 2038, and even though irreversible damage has been done, we are on the right track in keeping the world habitable and limiting death from climate change through moving into a virtual world.